Welcome to the TradNurse podcast. This is episode 14. So today I have an awesome guest. Her name is Nicole Moore. Nicole's background is in ICU and currently works in the critical care float pool. She has been a nurse for 3.5 years and comes from an entire family of nursing, which that's amazing. Also a mom of 5 boys. We are lucky to have her as she was able to squeeze in some time between naps and mommy time. She's also an author with a book titled Behind the Nurse's Smile, available on Amazon, and owner of a very witty Substack and serious Substack titled Nurse That Won't STFU, which is Shut the F Up. What I admire most about Nicole is her ability to bring humor into the incredible high stressors of nursing. So, today's topic is one every nurse has experienced, and that is burnout. I'm going to let Nicole have the mic to introduce herself further and dive into the experience of burnout, how it feels physically, emotionally, and we'll go from there. So, welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Christine. So, yes, with my experience, I know a lot of people see my nursing years and they're like, you haven't been a nurse long enough to know burnout. And I say, well,
Yes, you have.
that's fine. But I also grew up in hospitals and literally did homework in the L&D unit because my mom is L&D. So I entered the field with a bit of knowledge, not entered jaded, but I did enter with kind of a hesitation. I did not enter nursing as a calling. I entered nursing as a career out of necessity. So so I started in the ICU. I remember when I interviewed for the ICU, I already worked in the hospital as a tech, and I went to school in the same hospital. So I interviewed and I sat down with the ICU director at the time and I said, hey, so I almost didn't come to this interview. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, you all have a terrible reputation in the ICU, in the hospital. It's like I have been warmed off from interviewing because people who knew me said, you're not going to get along down there. You know, you are going to clash with the personalities because you don't do the bullshit. Excuse my language. And I told her, I said, but I want to do ICU. And I don't let people get in the way of what I want to do because I'm only with them for 12 hours. That's very much my mindset. I've never been the type that goes to work to make friends. I go to work to do my job. And if friends come, that's great. But I'm there to do a job ultimately. I'm there for the patients. I'm not there for the drama. It just tends to happen. So when I told her that, she kind of told me that she knew that that was the reputation. She was interim. She was kind of weeding out and changing the culture. Now, had I gone with her unit, I imagine my experience would have been different, but I went with a different ICU. And I was a new nurse, so that first year is hard. I can't ever say that the first year of anything you can qualify, right? Because it takes you a year before you decide if you like something, if you decide if you're good at it. And let's be honest, the first year of nursing is basically like shoving all of those years of nursing school that we did for whatever reason, just to then go and do our career for them to say everything you learned is wrong and we're going to do it this way. So it's already crazy. It's already hectic. I don't look at that first year. But my first year did have a lot of the bullying and it had a lot of the undercurrents and stuff that honestly I didn't talk to anybody about. And so my burnout came a lot from that because I was internalizing it a lot. I am an A type personality and I like to do things right. I like to know what I'm doing. I don't like to seem incompetent. And that first year of nursing, I mean, you are incompetent. Like you seem incompetent a lot, you know, and I had to like really swallow that and remember how to ask for help. When I knew that I needed to get out of the ICU is when I realized I did not trust to ask for help anymore. And so for me, I said, that's not okay. Not here in the ICU, and you need to ask for help. You need to be able to dip your head out and ask for help and not hesitate. There cannot be hesitation in the ICU. So for me, it was a decision, and it happened to work out timing wise. I had a baby, so I went on maternity leave. I reached out to the ACNO at the time and I told her, I said, I absolutely cannot come back unless I switch back to unless I go to float pool, which I had been float pool as a tech before. So I'd already talked to the managers there and whatnot. I said, I cannot go back to ICU. I will not. It's not good for me. It got to the point where I had so much anxiety that I was crying before work, crying after work, crying in the bathroom between patients. It was bad. I took my maternity leave. I came back float pool. It was a whole different world. It even going back to the ICU, it took me a couple times. Like when I first started back, they didn't let me go to the ICU at first because my managers very much knew what I had been dealing with, and they said, "Well, we'll just give you a break from there, and you can learn the other floors," which I greatly appreciated. Uh, but now I can go back to the ICU. Now I have the confidence. I can go to any floor. You know, I've been a charge on floors, um, and I burned out doing that rather quickly. Not because I didn't like the charge.
This is good, by the way.
Cut me off if I start rambling.
No, it's good. It's good because this is the stuff I nurses we've all experienced it.
Okay. Um, so yes, so I started doing a charge or like really testing it. Okay, so I was approached by my managers to do like a fill-in charge position on a neuro step down unit. And I was very excited. I was honored. I love taking leadership positions. And I took a charge position, and the floor was quickly my experience. Okay, I have to protect my license. But I also had that pull because I do like the leadership position. That was a track that I wanted to do. So I really leaned in and I tried. Now keep in mind at the time I was PRN, but I stepped into a full-time
Wow.
role and was there 3 to 4 times a week. And I did that. Yes, I got a pay bump, but I mean, it's like a dollar or 2, let's be honest. The charges are getting a buck or 2. So, but it was for the experience, and I knew, okay, if I can take this, then I could put it on my resume. I can take it to the next spot. I very much still had that mindset. Then there were lots of instances that were not okay. I mean, there were times, so the unit, I don't remember exactly how many, it was a small unit, and that drives me crazy when they start talking about how they staff per the acuity of the unit because that's false. It's a lie. Because a neuro step down unit is a neuro step down unit. I don't care. These people, they have TBIs, they have strokes, they need help with every meal.
What is the
So,
staffing ratio for the neuro step down?
so what they would do is they would do 1 nurse to 5 patients, which you would think, okay, except for then most of the time they wouldn't have a tech. The charge would also be in staffing. So there would be times they would shut the unit down. They would like close it down to 10 rooms, and I would show up and I would have 5 patients, and I would have 1 nurse who also has 5 patients, and that was our staff.
And you were still charged?
And I was still
You were
charged,
taking
yes,
pay yeah.
and still had to go to meetings, the bed meetings and whatnot. And we had instances, we had centennial events, we had codes that could have gone way better if we had had better staffing. We were on the top floor of the entire hospital, so 7th floor, and there would be 2 of us with 10 patients. And also legally, and I told them, I said, "We can't leave the floor now. We can't go get lunch. We can't literally physically leave the floor because." And the nurse I was working with, she was also a very seasoned travel nurse, so I mean, we could handle it. It's never that we can't handle it. The point is that we shouldn't have to, and patients shouldn't have to suffer because we're short-staffed. So that is the quickest way to bring your nurses out, is by giving them more than they should be able to do. Because, yeah, we can, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that we should, and it doesn't mean that it's safe, and it doesn't mean that it's healthy for your staff or your morale of your hospital as a whole. So, and that unit is still very much run that way. I eventually I had to step down. I told them, I said, "Hi, I'm so sorry. I absolutely can't do this." I waited until they had hired some full-time charges, and I will tell you that those full-time charges are already gone.
That's the thing. You orient someone, it takes a lot of time to orient someone to any position, but the system doesn't change. What would you say are the 3 driving burnout issues in nursing? Like staffing, admin, burden, moral injury, unsafe, pay? Because I think it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. So me, my view, the biggest driving things is the staffing. I mean, by going out of their way to understaff ever since COVID because they saw that they could. They saw that we could run at bare minimums because we had to, because we didn't have a choice, because people were dying. Well, so people stopped dying at such a rapid rate, but they kept the staffing at a skeleton crew. And then the nurses, oh, and one big thing, I had a nurse reach out to me just recently. She just wanted to tell me her frustrations of her hospital. Staffing nurses can do so much that if another department is short staffed or they don't have enough, nurses can do it. That is your biggest burnout. Nurses, you can be dietary, you can pass the trays out. Nurses, you can get your labs. Labs short today, you can get your labs. You don't have any techs today, you can do your vitals. You can do total patient care on 3, 4, 5, 6 patients on med surg floors. That is not, it's impossible. You show up as a nurse, you see your assignment, and your day is immediately ruined. You immediately look at that assignment and say, I guess we're going to survive for 12 hours. That's the only
You
goal.
immediately look at it and you feel that stress in your body,
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
feeling of, "I wanna cry." That's just not how a profession should be run.
it's not. And then the second one, at least for me, is when you go to the higher ups and you voice your concerns and you are gaslit, or you get told to smile, or you get, this is my favorite. Just remember, this is their worst day. Unacceptable. That is not an excusable reason to be a terrible person. I don't care. I have taken care of patients that it's actually their worst day, and they did not treat nurses like trash. They did not cuss them out. They didn't talk to them like terrible. And then to turn around and go tell your leadership who you should be able to go and say, hey, this patient called me XYZ, and this is what I did. I might have not apologize. I certainly wasn't smiling. And I told the patient, hey, you can't talk to me like that. That's inappropriate. And then you get wrote up, and then you get asked, what did you do to de escalate the situation?
You become the problem.
Yeah. And it's hard because you're like, well, I can't, I'm set up for failure as soon as I get my assignment. And then I get in trouble because I'm not happy about my assignment. But you didn't listen to any of the ones who are on the floor when we told you this wasn't safe, but yet we're supposed to be happy?
We're gonna unpack this. But let's go back to leadership, and do you think that they understand how burnt out the bedside nurses are, and that big disconnect when you go to them and you explain what's going on, and they say, "Okay, I hear you," and "We're gonna fix this," but then they don't. Nothing ever gets done. That is gaslighting. That is when you get told, "Yes, we hear you," but they don't, and therefore you are pushed up against a wall because nobody likes to leave a job, especially if you're like charge nurse and you're wanting to take on this role. You're vested in that, you want to
Mhm.
make it better, and your job as charge nurse is to identify the areas where there are problems and how do you fix them so that the team can work more cohesively during that shift.
Right.
So your
Agreed.
job is to bring these little details to your manager.
Yes, and the whole going to leadership thing and the gaslight, I mean, that's a whole other I
A whole
could
other
go on a
topic.
rant about
Yeah.
that, but it's just you can't tell people to swallow nails and then tell them to smile about it. You can't do it. They're gonna spit blood back at you. I don't understand, and then for it's just hard. If you healthcare, you're holding people's lives. This is what I don't understand, okay? About a baseline minimum. Get rid of the drama, get rid of the personalities, get rid of the hierarchy. At base minimum, these are people's lives that we are taking care of as nurses. Nurses are the ones with the patients for 12 hours, not the doctors, not dietary, not lab, and certainly not leadership who hasn't been on the floor. So, why aren't the nurses making every decision that affects the floor? Instead, Leadership makes decisions and then trickles it down, doesn't ask nurses, and then has the audacity to get mad when we push back. You didn't ask us, but you changed our entire workflow, but you didn't respect us enough to ask. Like it's a simple thing. These are people's lives. We need to be able to trust the people around us. And if we can't trust our leadership and our leadership is putting in wedges between nurses, then you can't trust the nurses next to you.
And
Now you have
patients
just yeah, your
patients and the
patients.
public are figuring this out. They do not wanna go into the hospital because it's unsafe.
And that's my favorite thing is don't tell the patients that we're short staffed. I sure as hell will. Thank you so much because A, I'm not getting screamed at for 13 hours because room 208's mad because I can't get to him because I got 4 other patients that I'm doing total patient care on. So I certainly am going to at bedside say, we're going to do our best today. I mean, my badge reel, and it's funny and it gets a laugh, but it's serious. It says keep them alive until 7:05. That is the goal. And sometimes I tell patients this is our only goal today. Okay. We are not performing miracles today. Hopefully, we are surviving for 12 hours, and I make it light. I don't go into my patients and I'm like, this place sucks. But I'm also not going to lie to them. They're
Right.
adults.
Because
They're adults.
when their call bell is going off and you're in another patient room and you can't get out and nobody's answering that call bell, you have to tell them the truth. The patients know. So what are you gonna, like, be like, "Oh, no, I'm just a bad nurse because I'm"
Exactly.
you're gonna tell them the truth, and they know. They can feel it, they can see it.
Yeah. I've had patients. Because, I've had patients who, because I do connect with my patients pretty quickly because I am myself and I'm honest, just period. And a lot of people for a lot of my life has been like, well, you just can't do that. You just shouldn't do that. This isn't an appropriate place. Don't tell them that. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe more people should tell the truth and maybe more people should just be who they are. Like, I work in a inner city level 1 trauma center, right? And so when I get told, "Well, did you smile?" No, I did not smile at that 6'5" man who was screaming at me in the hallway. Sure didn't, but I did tell him where he could go and what I was doing and that I would catch up to him when I was done giving blood to a patient. Like, but then, and so it's just hard because you can't trust leadership, you can't go to them. And you asked about the disconnect, and that is my biggest thing because I've watched it happen. They get the green badge, and then all of a sudden they forgot they were the same nurse cussing out a family member a week before, but now they're writing me up. And I'm like, hold on, because what happened? You got your green badge, so now you're a charge. Okay, congratulations. Also, did you forget who you were? Because I don't I remember the floor nurse from a week ago who was ready to go to bat, but then now you're writing me up because a patient was lying about me, and I said, "You can't lie on me," and you write me up? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me because I don't get it because why are you stepping on your lateral coworkers to get to go where are you going? Like, what is your ultimate goal? I never understood stepping on people to climb a ladder in healthcare because I'm like, where are you gonna go? Like, you're still a nurse. You're
Right.
still a nurse as a house soup. You're still a nurse as a charge. You're still a nurse as a nurse manager, as a CNO. You're still a nurse. We still have the same degree.
Let's get back into burnout. How has burnout spilled over into, like, would you say your family life and your personal relationships? Because it does.
It does. It very much does. Now, I will say that I am blessed. So I quickly learned a decompression routine for myself, and it saved me. And again, I am blessed because I have a family of nurses. So when I say I have a family of nurses, I mean my little brother is a nurse. When he was married, his husband was a nurse. My aunt is a nurse, and then my mom is a nurse. That is our family. There's just my grandma
Right.
otherwise. There's just my grandma otherwise. Everyone else was a nurse. And I was the last one to join. So we worked the same shifts basically, like my mom, my brother, and then me. We all worked day shifts and we all pretty much worked the same shifts a lot. And so we had each other's schedule. So what would happen is in the morning on the way to work, we all were on the because we all live here. So we were all driving to the same or different hospitals in the same city. And so we would all be on the phone on the way in. But the one thing that I would tell anybody and everybody, every nurse, everyone in healthcare, because if you don't have, my husband's not healthcare, or my ex husband, but he wasn't healthcare. Obviously, else it's just kids. I didn't have anyone. If you don't have a support group, find a friend in your unit, another nurse, just someone else who works in healthcare, and talk to them before you see your family, before you get home. That drive home, that decompression, life saving,
Wow.
because I was able to shed everything that I could not come home and dump on someone who didn't understand. I mean, now don't get me wrong. If you have a super great, supportive, one of those perfect partners that just understands everything and they're like an active listener, awesome. They might fill in. I can't speak to that. I didn't have that. I had one that just kind of glazed over. And so, like, that doesn't help for me personally. I need someone that I know is like taking it in and is
Yeah,
like
so you're not
reacting.
dumping it on them. I mean, do
Right.
you know that in nursing, divorce is one of the highest,
Yeah.
things that happen to nurses, unfortunately, because it's happened to me, and I didn't realize I'd do it. I thought I was just coming home and talking to my spouse about my stressful job, and
Yeah.
he seemed like he was able to handle it. I
And
don't.
and it is. I can't, I mean, I don't know from the other, well, okay, that's not true, because at the time, he ended up getting a job at the railroad, and so he'd come home and tell me that, and I could feel myself kinda do the same thing. So it's not their fault, right?
Right.
They don't understand. You don't
They
know
don't.
what you don't know, and you can't put yourself in a position
I don't
if
think
you
the
don't know.
average human understands truly what a nurse does in the hospital
Mm-mm.
setting on a day-to-day basis. They just think, "Oh, you're just, taking care of wounds and being nice to
Passing
people,
meds,
being
giving
so
water.
nice. What a great job."
Meanwhile, we're sweating through
Mhm.
layers and layers of clothes. There's blood, there's pee, there's snot. I mean, it's crazy.
And
And when
let's
I
admit it, the patients have gotten worse.
they are, they are. Like I said, I love my hall. The one thing that has kept me in my hospital is the patient population. Now, I know that is kind of contrasting, but as a trauma, as a critical care, I mean, level one, that's where it is. I want to be where
Right.
the shootings and all the things are
Exactly.
happening. But what keeps me there are the patients and the staff, because the culture. And I've worked at other level one trauma. So I worked at the other level one trauma that was like everything glitters and gold and we have everything new and everything's nice and we're the fancy smancy. I hated the culture. Yep. I walked in, my head down. I didn't talk to anybody. I get to my unit. And then when I went to the hospital I'm at now, it was a wild difference. I mean, I had to force myself to lift my head up as I walked in because everybody talks to you. It doesn't matter, maintenance, dietary, nurse, whoever. If you pass them, hey, how you doing? How are you doing? It was disarming at first because again,
So
but
that is true though, if the culture is good, and that does stem from management down. They build that culture. So
yeah,
the housekeepers, they're part of the team, the security, janitors, but then there are places where that culture is not built and you feel it.
yep. And I've seen the shit. And honestly, I can't speak to other departments. I don't know anything about their leadership or like what goes on or whatever.
Mhm.
But I speak to other departments, and I hear some of their same thing, like, oh, so for instance, this is a good thing to also to add to the whole burnout thing, valuing your employees. Let me explain. So the weekends at my hospital, they stopped serving dinner for like they closed the cafeteria for dinner. So they stopped serving for employees on the weekends, right? Now, they already didn't do nights, like, overnight, which, okay, they should. There's no reason they shouldn't. Being the most profitable system, there's no reason they shouldn't because I've worked at other hospitals where they do provide meals for night shift because, hello, it's still 12 hours that you still need to eat and function. But they stopped serving dinner. When we found out why, when I asked the department why, I talked to them and discovered lately or later is because they weren't making enough off the employees. So you stopped feeding your employees because we weren't paying enough, that you were overcharging us for the slop that you serve on the weekends, which is whatever was left over from the week. Like, That is so disheartening because we know how much our big people make. It's just like, do you not know? What drives me crazy is nurses we're the largest workforce in the world. The world. Okay. Not the country, not this, the world have always been. Like, if nurses could just swallow their martyrdom, their Florence Nightingale
That's a
syndrome,
good word.
and stop worrying about, oh, well, patients will die. They already are, and they're going to continue dying as
You're
long as we
dying.
let it
The
happen.
nurse is
Right.
dying
And we're
inside
dying.
by just constantly being poked and prodded and
Exactly.
like, let's take this away for how about food? Now let's just like we won't feed you. All we want is just some food.
Right. Like some chicken strips,
Take
you know
that
what I'm
away.
saying? Like mashed potatoes. I don't know, something simple. But they were just like, nope, we're not making enough. We'll just close it. So that's a huge way to devalue you devalued your entire weekend staff, not just nurses. You devalued your entire weekend staff doing that. You know, like they have a Starbucks in there. It's only open Monday through Friday. And like I it I know it's always been a thing. Like nights get the shaft. I worked nights. I remember nights don't get the potlucks. They get the leftovers. The weekends they get and I know that everyone has things. But some of these things are unnecessary. Okay. Um One other way that I curved the burnout that worked for me, it may not work for everyone, but it worked for me. And it didn't start as a coping mechanism. It started as a record. I don't even have it, but I have this little bitty notebook and I carried it with me. I always have paper and pen with me. I'm just that person. I was a little Harriet the Spy era and I journal everything. So with nursing, I'm very meticulous with my notes on my patients and whatnot. And I quickly realized that I needed to be very meticulous with notes that I could take home. Notes that had nothing to do with patients, but had
Mhm.
everything to do with the day and who I worked with and what happened exactly because there was a good chance that in a month I was going to get called in and be asked about something that had occurred. And I'm gonna be like, "I don't know. How would I possibly know?" So I started the record. So I think that is very good to have, whether it's journaling, reading, calling someone on the way home, listening to music, something. But what isn't good is not talking to anybody. Okay. Just dealing with it with yourself or you went home and you just were able to dump on your husband, right? Which I mean, of course you would think you would do that. That's your partner. But then on the counter, you say you got divorced. So then the next time, maybe you would think, oh my God, no, I shouldn't. I don't want to tell them. I don't want to dump. I don't want to repeat. But then you're the one suffering again because now you're just shoving, 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 shoving. And eventually it's going to blow up. It's going to. And it's either going to implode or explode. That's
It
the
will
only way
show up
pressure goes.
in a way you don't even realize it's gonna show up. And so what you're describing is abuse. We take on a layer of it's a subtle abuse. In
Hmm.
some forms, it's not very subtle, but
It
and
is.
so writing things down is a way to counteract the gaslighting because when you do get called in, which I have been called in many times because I was just one of those nurses that was like, "No, not doing that," you know?
Hmm.
Not doing it. I can only do this much, that's it. So I had to learn that the only way to protect yourself is to write it down. Because if you didn't write it down, you don't remember it, didn't happen. And so that is a really good tactic. Write things
It
down.
is. And I would like to say that you shouldn't have to, but like I said, I've always been the type that you want to keep a record because you just never know. Your memory's not great, and you don't know when someone's going to pull something from you, and you
But we
don't know.
don't live in that world where you don't have to anymore,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
We
and I
gotta
mean, you can
protect
get called
ourselves.
to court 5, 10 years later, and you don't take your report sheets. You're not supposed to, and it's just
Mhm.
like all of these things. Yeah, you need to have a record because you need a way to protect yourself because this is why I tell nurses all the time. When I refuse something or say no, and I did. I remember the first time I refused the assignment, I was shaking and I didn't refuse the assignment. I refused the patient because it was wildly inappropriate to put a comfort care patient on a med surg floor where I already had 5 total patient care patients. They were going to give me a 6. as an ICU nurse, as a critical care, and as someone who has advocated for end of care life, I don't play with that. So I said, absolutely not, because that patient, I cannot be in there every 15 minutes and tend to that patient as they deserve. And she goes, well, you don't know that they'll need the meds. And we're done because they are allowed the meds. You don't know that they won't need the meds. And I'm not going to risk the dignity of that person with their family,
Right.
their end of life, and
Yeah.
accept it. And she ended up taking it out of the charge. And it's just like, and I had a nurse and she looked at me and she was a new nurse and her big old eyes and she just said, I want to be like you when you grow up. And it was when she grows up. And it was the most surreal thing. And I just looked at her, I said, no, don't do that. Like, I'm gonna get in trouble. And I did. And what drove me crazy, what really pissed me off is because we are unionized. And I got pulled in, and I brought union with me. After the whole thing was over, go out. And the union rep said, maybe next time we don't do that.
So what's the
I
point of
said,
the union of protecting you?
I'm like, "Are you guys
She's
not the
gonna put
same
her
union
own,
that's
like,
in
judgment on it.
California where the golden everything's great? It's the same union. What is the deal? Why is it not transferring?"
Wow.
So,
So I know a lot of nurses that tell me they will not work at a hospital unless there is a union for all of the reasons that we're discussing right now and more. But that is sad that we're in that state where
yes, the unions I wish were, or at least ours. I wish I was excited for the union. That's what made me so mad because we don't have a choice, first of all, which is a big red flag. We don't have a choice. You're automatically in it, so you automatically pay the dues. So I was excited. I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, we're a union. We're one of the only ones." But yeah, I'm disappointed. I'm very disappointed with the what I've seen. I know they try. I know that, and I know I've striked with them, and I can't say that I'm full union. I don't go to the meetings because usually I've got a bunch of kids, and I'm like, do you want me to
right.
bring all of them with me? But I do speak with them. I will reach out with them, like when units tell me something. Just the other day, the union had reached out, like, "Hey, we're," because they cut off our incentives again, which they do every year around this time. Which around this time, it's almost expected. It's the holidays. We're low census. I got called out like a week ago, which never happened. So around this time, I kind of expect it, but they're, going to a meeting and they want to discuss it. And of course, all of the units are up in arms about it. But here's the thing: everybody can bitch and moan, but as long as people still pick up or do it anyways, nothing changes. And nobody understands that. Or the problem is we're a lot of nurses, like I am now, are single moms and we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So it's like you pay. This is what my realization now that I'm trying to like escape bedside. We have this degree. We can save lives. I have a bachelor's degree. I can save a life. I have certification, blah, blah, blah. What else can I do with my degree? CNA. What? Why does none of this transfer logically to any other job? Because if you put me as a project manager, I promise I can manage your little 10 employees and whatever little emergencies they have.
So I know you've brought this up in staff meetings and you brought it up with the union and the hospital. They've taken away incentives. Is there something that they can do? Is it really just come down to give us more staff?
I mean, yes. I mean, there's never been a shift that I've been fully staffed that I've been unappreciative. There's never been a shift that I've been fully staffed that I haven't still been just as busy. It cuts costs, and that's what's the most frustrating, and everyone's like, "Well, it's because 'cause you're at a profit hospital." We have for-profits too going through the same thing. So, it's not just so it's not just it's a hospital problem. It is a
It's all
healthcare
hospitals. I
system.
worked in a rural critical care access 26-bed hospital, and they cut our, um, evening meal, weekend
Mhm,
meal. We were always short-staffed. They had a union. I mean,
and
it's
it's
all hospitals.
it is, and the expectations that we have to risk our life. So, I live in the Midwest, and you came from Vermont, so it snows, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm, and
Yeah.
they're like, "You have to be here."
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm not driving. We'll send a car. I'm not riding with a stranger either. That's crazy. But they will literally call the day before. They'll send out a thing, and It's almost threatening, they'll be like, "There's gonna be a storm, so you need to make plans. We're opening up the floor for you to come stay." I'm not coming to stay on the psych floor that's abandoned. Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
good. Also, just no. Like, you go. Are you closer? And I understand. I'm not saying,
it's like we can't call out.
yeah, can't call out, can't get sick, but work around sick people.
Exactly.
Can't have kids that get sick, but yeah, we'll support you to have kids. And you're going to work up until you have your baby, and then we'll give you 6 weeks if you're lucky. If you've been here for a year, then you get 6 weeks off to take care of your baby.
It's awful.
It's awful. And then,
Meanwhile, in Sweden, they get a year off.
yeah, and then the not,
Everybody,
and
not
yeah,
just the healthcare.
other, and they do paternity leave in other countries for like a year. They give them their income. They still
Yep.
pay them for the time they're off.
I have a question. I do hear of a lot of nurses leaving staff jobs, permanent staff jobs, and going to travel nursing or per diem or explore non-bedside roles because of burnout.
Yeah, well, people always assume. I think a lot of nurses stay for a long time because there's this guilt, right? Like, if you
Yeah,
leave, you're like, "Oh my god." So for me, it's the family guilt, like, "Oh my god, I sacrificed all this time with my newborn babies." I mean, I had babies during nursing school, like, I put off my marriage at the time, which honestly probably should have kept putting it off. But either way, it's not the job. You sit with this guilt. You're like, "Oh my god, I spent so much money on this degree and my family sacrificed so much time. And if I quit nursing, then how's that look, you know? If I quit
right,
nursing to go work at Home Depot because it makes me happier, how's that look?"
right. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's that like level of psychological abuse.
But they're weaponizing our compassion, and
Yeah,
that's what it is. And so nurses are bleeding hearts, and we are our biggest enemies because we
yeah,
get in our own way because we put the patients first. We put the patients first always. A real nurse does, just naturally. But here's the problem: we're putting the patients before ourselves, which means we're not putting our oxygen mask on first. So what's happening is your nurses are burning out. Your patients will not stop. The patients will always come because there will always be people. And then the nursing schools just churn out nurses. That's fine, but you're burning through them in 6 months. I've watched nurses leave nursing the entire career gone in 6 months because they put them on med surg at my hospital. And I mean, I watched a kid walk out and say, "I will never do this again," after just graduating.
new nurses. I've heard of that happening. It's gonna take them
And these are
a
young
good 2
nurses.
years to really feel comfortable knowing what they're doing, and you let them walk out the door knowing what they're experiencing? It's awful.
And I think that honestly, I think that the schools are at fault. Um, the gaslighting starts from the get-go, from the school, okay? Because like, training starts to get put in, right? Patient first, patient care, patient rights, patient right, and it's just that's what you hear for 2 to 4 years for your degree. Patients first, patients matter. There isn't a class on burnout. Should be. There
100%.
is not a class on advocacy. Should be.
Yep, 100%.
There needs to be a class on protecting your license. Every school should talk about your license and your responsibility to it. Because what happens is you graduate nursing school, you go get this license, and then and that's yours. But nobody emphasizes that to you in nursing school. Nobody tells you this is your responsibility. And guess what? That hospital does not care
Yeah, they're
that
not
you
gonna
will lose
protect
it.
you.
In fact, they'll
Should be
throw
in
you up
nursing
there.
school, it should be we should be taught staffing ratios too. It is our moral duty to protect our license and to say no to anything that is above and beyond those ratios,
Hmm.
like 2 to 1 ICU. It is our job to be like,
Yes.
"No,
And so the
say
one
no."
time I refused an actual, like, the assignment was because so I'm ICU, and then I went critical care. Now we are unionized. Now float pool seems to be gray areas when it comes to that union book a lot, which is a problem because float pool is the biggest unit in the hospital and you have unionized nurses there. So here's my thing. So ICU, they have float where you can go. So ICU, the acuity like lowest that you can go is tele, right? So you've got tele, you've got step down, you've got ICU. Okay. And burn. So your critical care, that's where you can float. So then that was my training, right? And so then I went to critical care float and that was fine for a little while. Then they sent me to med surge. And I said, so the first time I did it, I just did it, but I drowned.
Yeah.
And I went to my leadership. I said, hey. And this is when I was still good with my leadership. I would go to them all the time. Like I was very tight with them. I said, hey, that's crazy. I can't do that. I had 6 patients. I'm used to 2. I can't, my ICU brain
Yeah.
cannot like, and at the time I was still very much like my little brother started working there then and he's a longtime nurse, even though he's my younger brother. He's the longtime nurse, and I was the baby nurse. And he came on. He worked med surg, so he saw what I was doing. He goes, "You're being an ICU nurse. Can't do that." He said, "This is how it works down here: morning meds, afternoon meds, evening meds. Bam, that's it." I was because I was like, "Oh my god, this has to be. It's due in 30 minutes. I have to get this done now." He goes, "Nope, morning meds, afternoon meds, evening meds. That's it. Blood sugars, give meds." He's like, "That's what you have to do on this floor. You do not get to do your full head to toe and all of that. You're doing your assessments as you go." And so I had to like retrain my own brain, but I had to do that. And my little brother helped me, not leadership. So then they didn't send me there often, but then they started to. And I was having horrible shifts. I was going to them crying. I was like, "Hey, I cannot do this. Do not send me here again. Do not send me here again. I am ICU. I shouldn't be floating here. This is crazy. There is a gap." So they sent me again, and it was right after the whole like comfort care one the weekend before. So I showed up and I was not scheduled for it. But then when I got there, I saw that I was on there. So I called House Soup and before I accepted the assignment, I didn't take a report. I called House Soup and I said, "Hey, can you send me somewhere that's in my grid?" And she was like, "No, you're float pool. You have to go everywhere." I said, "Okay, well, I cannot come here. It's not safe. I can't do this assignment." So she's like,
So
"Okay,
you
well,
were
I'll have."
critical care float pool, correct? That's not med surg. So you were correct in explaining this.
That's what I thought. That because logically, that's what makes sense because you have critical care and then you have regular float pool. So if there's a
Right.
difference, you would assume their floats are,
Right.
apparently that's not the case, even though logically that
Right.
makes sense. But they tried to, so she said she was going to have to point me out. And I said, "Okay, and I went home.
You mean she's gonna write you up? Is that what that
So they have
means?
the point system at my hospital where
Oh,
it's like a no fault or whatever. And
got
she's
it.
like, you'll get a point. And I said, "Okay." And I went home. Well, then I get called from the director, HR, and manager. And after this phone call is when I started recording my home calls because I work weekends. They like to
So
call
she didn't
me.
just do the point thing, she complained about you
"Hmm?"
to HR, to your manager, and the chain of
It did.
command.
And so when they called me, I was terrified because they started talking about abandoning patients. And I was like, and I didn't have union, and this was just me. And I'm like, I didn't abandon anyone. And at the time, I'm running through my head because again, we're not taught the specifics and the laws and the rules of refusing. We're not
Right.
taught it. So I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, are they going to get me for abandoning patients? That is a huge thing. That is like license losing. So I'm freaking out. I went through that panic for quite a while because I told them exactly what she said. I said no because she said she's gonna have to give me a point, and then I would go home. It would be a point, and they were like, "She said that like I was lying or something." I said, "Yes, she did." They said, and she goes, "She didn't say that you would be at risk of abandoning patients." I said, "No, I'm pretty sure I didn't mistaken that. Like I didn't mix up the words there. It's a whole different phrase." But, they ended up dropping it because I didn't. I was like, I didn't all I saw was the paper. I didn't have a patient name. I didn't talk to a nurse, nothing. I said, I didn't abandon anybody
Because you
because I didn't
didn't
have
accept the
anybody.
assignment, so you were not
Right.
abandoned. Wonder if that holds up in a court of law.
So that's why they had to drop it. I mean, because I hadn't accepted it. But that right there, that's the gaslighting. Because had I not been a smart enough nurse to remember how the conversation had gone, I could have been strong armed into admitting that I had abandoned patients on that phone call, and then would have been screwed later because they would have been like, "Well, you said that you abandoned the patient," and that's the shit they do. That's the stuff they do, and that's how they get people. That's how they get nurses,
But
good
that house
nurses out.
supervisor set you up. She didn't tell you she was gonna do that.
It was
So when you're discussing protecting yourself, that's where the writing things down came from, was
yes.
after that.
Yes, it was to keep a record because we have so much stuff that we have to remember and that we have to chart and that we have to do that we forget about ourselves. We forget about the things that are going on with us that are also important because it's the microaggressions. That's what I have started recording is the microaggressions and who and why and what was going on and who was around. And the records I have are crazy. And at the time, I was just doing it for the record. And then I started the process of divorcing my husband. And that's why I kind of laughed when earlier you were like, it's almost like we're in an abusive relationship. And I said, oh my gosh, because that's when I started having issues, is when I realized what I was dealing with at home. And so I stood up here and filed for divorce. And, you know, the fog was lifted and saw things clear, and then went to work and saw those same behaviors and stood up tall there too, which was encouraged by my managers when it was towards my husband. But then when I brought it back to work and was still standing in myself, in my truth, in the reality of what was going on, then it was a problem. Then I became a problem because I was pointing out what was happening there at work.
Yeah, because once you allow this abuse, this level of gaslighting in with a certain family member or your work, others can feel it and
Hmm.
put serious boundaries of what I'm accepting and what I'm not.
Yep.
And the funny thing is that you might like this. I noticed this little observation. You can't gaslight a nurse because nurses, all they do is observe and record, observe and record. We have like, a 12-hour shift. We could sit down and write it all up in our notes at the end of the shift if we had to, hour by hour, what happened, especially an ICU experienced nurse.
And it's our job.
It's a psychological assault, is what it is.
It is, and it's almost I mean, I was leaving a narcissistic relationship, and that is what I compare the hospital relationship to. I mean, there's gaslighting, there's, "Well, what did you do? What could you do differently?" And then I started getting told, like, I wasn't compartmentalizing enough, you know? They're like, "Well, you're bringing home to work with you." And I was like, "Right, well, I'm a human, and I'm going through hell at home, so you're welcome that I showed up, and I'm sorry that I'm not smiling, but are you talking to me about my patient care, about my nursing skills?" And like a couple times I was like, well, we had a patient that said you just didn't seem like you were happy to be there and blah, 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 blah. And you know what? You're right. There very well, I'm sure, have been instances where there were patients that were not happy or that I did not have a happy relationship with. I'm a human. Again, not going to vibe with everybody. Totally okay.
If you're there doing your job and the tasks at hand and taking care of your nursing responsibilities, no matter what is going on at home, that's all that is required of you. And not every day we come to work with a smile on our face. Nobody does. We do our best.
And and they try and I got when I told someone that I got wrote up for smiling, they were like, "That's illegal." And I said, "Well, yes, it is. It is illegal to get written up for your personality, but how do the hospitals get away with it? Those I care values or those little culture things,
Mhm.
right? Those little things that we have to sign and say that we'll follow. One of those is always that we'll smile. It's bullshit. It's
Yeah.
bullshit. It's from, I don't know, Florence Nightingale, I guess, but I don't think she smiled often either.
No,
I don't know
no.
where the whole like holier than now
It's the
nun version
HR
came.
departments. They brought in HR departments to keep us in line. It came from all HR departments. It's the buzzwords, the gaslighting, the write-ups, the performance evaluations, all of it is time consuming and to keep you in line, and
It
that's
is.
where it started.
It is, and it is, it's hard, and I've seen good nurses go up to leadership, and I've seen better nurses walk away from leadership as soon
Yeah.
as they realize that
They don't make a
and
difference. They
they
can't because
don't, they
your hands are
can't.
tied with budget and administrative bullshit, basically. Okay. So, we've talked about protecting yourself,
Ways to
you
curb
kn
it.
yeah, and then also, like, okay, if you could tell a new bedside nurse coming into hospital what to expect and how to make sure that you are not going to be targeted, how would you give that advice? What
If you had asked me more than a month ago, I would have told you, "Keep your head down, you just show up, you clock in, and you do your job, and then you go home because it's only 12 hours and it's just a paycheck." But now I would just tell them, "Be the target, but stand up in it." Now, if I were to go to nursing schools and I didn't wanna scare off the nurses, because I don't wanna lure people away from nursing. Nursing is a very pertinent profession. It's critical, but the bullshit, the other stuff isn't. It's not. It has nothing to do with saving lives at all. And as someone who is very black and white when it comes to efficiency, I'm like, nope, don't care. Do not care that you want me to wear a scrub top where I cannot do compressions as well over the or the hospital T-shirt that was fine up until we have a new whatever who's decided it doesn't look okay. Okay, cool. Well, unless he's doing compressions, then I don't think it matters what we're wearing if we are wearing hospital sponsored stuff. Like, and I made the comment, like, are you paying us back? Because I'm not wearing these shirts anywhere else. And now I have to go get scrubs because I didn't have them because for years I have bought t-shirts from you and now you're saying I can't wear any of those. And
It
I'm like,
doesn't
scrubs
make
are not
sense.
cheap
No, they're
at
not.
all.
No.
So it's just,
And
it's
I don't
like,
think they're that comfortable either unless you're wearing the very expensive ones like the figs.
right.
They're the only ones that sucks it in.
And then you're not comfortable.
No. No.
So what I would, if I went into nursing school and I didn't want to scare them away, I would tell them a couple things. I would tell them to build their backbone immediately. Figure it out. Okay. And I think that schools need to have classes like that. You need to face confrontation before you're doing it on a professional level. You need to have a confrontating phone call with a doctor or a family member or have a belligerent patient scenario before you're in it.
Though that's so true. Nursing school doesn't teach any of that.
Perfect. No, teach them the real thing. Nursing schools are setting nurses up for failure, and then hospitals are confused when they get nurses who aren't happy, and then they burn out in 6 months. Well, you set them up for failure, you lied to them for 2 to 4 years, and then they came here and you all told them everything you learned is wrong, and we're going to teach you something different, and then we're going to throw you to the wolves. We're going to cut your orientation short because we're short staffed and we need you to go ahead and get on the floor. And then we'll give you about 20 days before we tell you, oh, you need to float, even though you're not supposed to float for like 3 months. We need you to float because we're short staffed somewhere else.
And then we're gonna write you up because you're not able to do any of this because you haven't had the training.
I mean, I don't know if you read my article last night that I posted. It's from a nurse who had sent me their story. I mean, they cut whole units out of our hospital. I mean, I don't know how you're a level one trauma center now and you don't have an OB.
They're cutting OBs in Vermont too. This is a
Yep,
thing.
they cut it. OB and NICU, gone. Hello, we're level one trauma. Where are they going? I don't understand.
I always just thought hospitals were independently run. They're run by a bigger organization because in Vermont they're cutting this too. When you
Yep.
said they were
And so
cutting weekend and evening dinners, they did that in my little hospital in Vermont. It's
mhm,
it's bureaucracy.
yep. And when I posted it in different nursing groups, I've had other nurses commenting like, they did this in my hospital. They did this with our neuro group. They did this with our psych group. This group's closing down, blah, blah. And the nurse that told me the story, it's local. So I did know some of it. But then when she told me that they got told in a WebEx, and there was between the 11 staff, they had over 200 years of work experience. That's how low their turnover was. And they told them on a WebEx that they were closed.
And what about their jobs?
I think one of them stayed with the company, is what she said. So only one stayed within the company, and locally, the hospitals in that company is the majority. So to not be in that company is a feat. Um, the night shift ones were able to get jobs, but none of the day shift ones were because it's NICU and L&D. Those are saturated, and you just cut a bunch of those nurses. They don't have anywhere to go. The jobs they offered them were for adults. And they were like, we don't know
They
adults.
don't have the skill set anymore for that.
Yep. And that's the thing is people they just think they can float everyone everywhere and
Yeah,
figure it out. And I'm like,
just because we're a
no,
nurse.
right.
Nursing is vast, vast, and you should never be one of those nurse that's like, "I know everything," because you
Mm-mm.
don't.
I'm quick to check if an ICU nurse is talking about med surge. Oh, I'm quick to check them. I say, go work their shift then. Go
Yeah,
do it because you can't. I promise you can't. You all struggle on telly where you have four. There's no way.
no,
Med surge is a specialty, period. The
100%.
nurses that work med surge, angels, because I would go to jail every single day.
Yeah,
There's no
it's
way.
hard. And you know what they're doing? They're changing the rural hospital med surg units into progressive units. So they're combining the ICU telemetry into this progressive unit, but they're still getting the same amount of patients, but they're getting tele patients, they're getting step down patients, and they're expected to do it. It's crazy.
So that's how our PCU is, which is the pulmonary step down. It's a progressive care unit, and they get shafted too, like the neuro step down does. It's another small unit where they like to take their secretary or take their techs because they're small or their charge is always in staffing. But those charges run to every code.
Yeah.
So you just took the charge not only off the floor, but then they have to leave their patients to go to any code. If they're at the code for a long time, their patients are just without a nurse, and your nurses are without a charge. So it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think that's how they get away with the staffing ratios and the acuity is they're just changing the names of the units.
Neuro PCU is still to this day never been slated as that, but that's what it is.
You're right.
But they staff it as
Staff
med
is that
surg.
way. So, if you had one word that could describe nursing, it could be more than one word. How would you describe the state of nursing right now?
State of nursing right now. It's in trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
It's in trouble.
Yeah, especially when you see these TikTok nurses that are leaving 6 months in. This is not
Nurses are realizing that they could make the same amount of money doing something else or consulting. Exactly. I came from customer service. I was a lifetime. That's how I ended up nursing. I was like, oh, I need insurance, right? It was never the money. I was like, oh, I need insurance. But then I always make jokes because I would go into nursing and there'd be sometimes I've told a patient, like, hi, so I'm not making tips anymore. I'm not getting you 5 things of crackers. I'm so sorry. I've got other things to do. Call me 12 times now for a coffee. This is not a waitress or this is not a restaurant and I can't accept tips. So I'm gonna need you to chill out. Or like getting yelled at about food. I have not snapped, but I have quickly told the patient, like, I did not cook this food. I didn't go down there. I didn't make it.
patients haven't been given the education that we don't have time for crackers and coffee. We just don't have time for that.
And if we do, if we're gonna do it, like, give us a minute. That's the
Yeah.
thing. I've told patients, give me a second. You hit the call light, and then I responded, and I didn't even get to do it before you hit it again. And now I'm in here. Now you're irritated, and I'm irritated because I couldn't even finish the thing you asked me to do. And I don't blame the patients for that because let's be honest, you get into a hospital as a patient, you get tunnel vision, apparently you forget, you think that you're the only person in that building. And I've had patients tell me that, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forget.
Well, you're paying enough for that room, they assume there's a level of
Yeah.
efficiency because it's not
They
service.
assume there's staffing. There's
That's not
absolutely should
their
be.
fault.
Right. And that's why I tell the patient. That's why I'm honest with them because it's not their fault. But it's not my fault either. So we'll trust, we get through it with comedy more often than not. I have some patients we get through it just by grit, and I come in and I give you your meds, and you're alive, I'm alive. That's it. That's how we look at each other, and that's okay.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up here. We have a really good this was a really good episode, but also one takeaway I just wanna remind everybody because I think it's brilliant, that your favorite debrief rule after a rough shift or after every shift is having that support system
Healthcare.
before you
Yeah.
get home to unwind. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and honestly, even if you don't have someone, I've found that even taking on your phone, recording a voice note, get it out. Just
Get it
get
out.
it out. And I mean, you can't write before you can, but you want to get home, right?
Mhm.
So get it out. Record while you're home, rant, and then just throw it away. Delete it, save it, listen to it later. But get it out of your system before you then go home where it will then spill out.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So, what is your social media or your contact information? How do people get a hold of you if they have questions or they want to contact you?
Yes. So on Facebook, it's kind of a two-way street. My author page is the Behind the Nurse's Smile on Facebook. A lot of people just go to my personal page though, which is also fine, which is just Nicole Moore on Facebook. So if you search my book, you'll find me. I am Googleable now, and I thought that was pretty cool that I even have a little AI description. I said, "Oh my god!"
That's so
But
awesome.
and then my book's on Amazon. It's ebook and paperback. I do rounds where I do signed copies, but I'm like still trying to figure out how to be a one woman distribution center. And and then my Substack. My Substack is where I really want people to go because that's where I can kind of do my full articles. I can really be me. I don't have to worry about Facebook like taking it down because it's
Yeah.
too opinionated or whatever.
You have an excellent Substack. People need to definitely go there. What is the title?
So it's Nurse That Won't STFU. And so I think it's like Ember Whispered at Substack, but it's just easier to look up. Nurse That Won't
I'll
STFU.
put it in the description below so that people
Yes,
will be able to link to it.
perfect.